Hello everyone, welcome to Terminally Nerdy. I'm your host Clay, and today we have the first of several of my tales from the Tabletop, where I'm going to tell you a story. Unlike the first time I did this a couple weeks ago, now, this is a story about one of my games. I actually held a Twitter poll. There were 4 options, and the one that won is a story titled Mr. Binkle's Goes Boom. So, in this particular story, it takes place a couple years ago, about 8 or 9 years ago now, actually. At the time, my wife and I were living with a roommate, and the roommate was obsessed with the World of Warcraft game, MMO. I play it still. But for those of you who are unaware, World of Warcraft, much like EverQuest over here did, believe it or not, this was a thing back in the days of D20, World of Warcraft had its own D20 game system. So you could buy a book and play Dungeons & Dragons in the World of Warcraft world with races, classes, and things inspired by it. And that's what happened. So, and I need to actually look this up real quick while I'm talking. So, the roommate was so into the World of Warcraft game that she found out about this and bought it immediately. Once she had it, she knew I could run it, so she asked me to. And my wife was interested in playing. One of our friends by the name of Dan, another guy who name was, we all called him Merwin. These were all people who wanted to play. So I was like, okay, we got 4 people plus me, we can do this. Now, I don't remember what Merwin played, unfortunately. I think he was like a fighter of some sort, or a warrior. The roommate played a druid, a blood elf druid. A night elf druid who was somehow friends with Thrall. I don't even remember how we did this one. Because they were all basically hordes. My wife, which we'll get to, she's the star of this story. We'll tell her in a minute. My buddy Dan, he played a Tauren Tinkerer. So what they did for this D20 game is they kind of adapted some of the professions to be classes. So the Tinkerer was basically the engineer profession from the game. He's funny for this story because he spent all of his money, literally all of it, on his starting invention, which was a giant metal totem that he would use to hit people with. And the totem had one special function, so Tinkerers could add functions to their inventions. And he had enough points and enough money to add one function. It produced a healing item once a day. And he was very specific on what it did. It would produce a tiny metallic squirrel would come running out and shit in a metal bowl. And it would shit ice cream, specifically Tigol and Fuhrer's strawberry-flavored ice cream, that would heal. It's very specific on that point. That's one character. Then we had the druid, cat druid, basically. And then we had Merwin, which I think, like I said, was a warrior. And then we had my wife. Now, my wife played a goblin, and her goblin's name was Skimbleshanks, and she spent all of her money on a Goblin Shredder. Now, for those of you who've never played World of Warcraft, a Goblin Shredder is basically a mech. Not a super large one. Probably a good 8-9 feet tall. Usually one hand's a claw, one hand's a saw blade. They were basically designed for work, but they can double as weapons. Hers really didn't have anything special to it. She spent all of her money and all of her points just having a basic shredder, with like some floodlights and some basic, mech stuff. So the eyes in the shredder, because shredders have like a chest and the goblin sits where the head would be. They were floodlights, she had the saw, she had the claw. Basically gave her armor. She basically had a second body. And the robot's name was Mr. Binkles. Can you see where this is going? And they're like I had to decide what to do with them. So I decided to send them to Ragefire Chasm. Ragefire Chasm being the first actual instance in World of Warcraft. Horde players, it's inside of Ogremer, it's very easy to get to. I say, we'll send you there, dungeon crawl, learn the mechanics, because it's D20 but with some quirks. The place is full of these things called Troggs, which are basically just angry little mole people almost. I wouldn't even call them mole people, they're just underground people, like offshoot of dwarves. Hard to describe. I'll put a picture somewhere where a Trogg. Here, right here. Picture right here. because I know how to do that now. So I send him to Ragefire Chasm. And for the most part, everything's going okay. You know, they get into a couple of small fights. At one point, the roommate tries to stealth. My wife's response, because it gets kind of dark, is to turn on her floodlights, completely ruining the stealth. My wife, being a giant stompy robot, has absolutely no stealth, and unfortunately for her, everyone hears it coming. So they finally make it deeper into the thing, into the chasm, and they come across a boss fight. And it's the first boss of the actual instance, which is basically just a melee fighter surrounded by Troggs near like a lava bridge. And everything ends up just getting fucked right there. Wife runs in, charges straight in, gets mobbed. You know, my buddy's Dan over here smashing things. No, he was a hunter. Merwin was a hunter, that's right, because he was shooting. He was off to the side shooting arrows in. The Druid's off behind everything. She snuck around. She starts stealthing. Everything's going the party's way until the boss rolls a critical on my wife. So, in D&D, in 3rd edition D&D, Greataxes have what's called a ×3 critical. So if you roll a D20 to attack, and you roll a natural 20, no modifiers, the die itself says 20, you critical, and instantaneously hit. Then you have to confirm it. He did. He was able to hit her again. Her armor class was like an 18. He easily hit her a second time. So then you roll its critical multiplier, which for the Greataxe that he was using was 3, which means I rolled triple what he would normally roll, with multiplying his strength. And his strength was like a +6. He was a burly, tough melee Trogg. So I rolled a 1d12 + 6 3 times, and rolled maximum every time. All of it. Then, because it gets even worse, we had ruled that her mech could possibly suffer catastrophic damage and possibly something negative would happen. So I one-shotted her in that mech suit. I think I was somewhere in the neighborhood of like almost 60 points of damage. I one-shotted my wife. But the mech suit, not her. Unfortunately, then we rolled, we were using crit damage rules, so there was like special effects. And we rolled that it hit the power core of her machine. And I determined that this was going to do something like in the neighborhood of 4d6 points of damage to everything within 20 yards. Basically a fireball. She refused to abandon ship. She sat in the top doing this, going, Mr. Binkles! Sure as shit, it exploded. I rolled maximum damage again and killed everybody. All of them. One of the first times I've ever done a TPK. It was just a series of luck rolls. It was ridiculous. This... like, just the image of all of them going, no! And her refusing to leap out. I gave her a chance to, like, leap out. They all failed reflex saves, because they had reflex saves. Every one of them failed their reflex save. It was just a literal pile of just negative rolls for them. And I tend to roll where... and unfortunately, at the time, I wasn't using a DM screen. So, I couldn't fudge it. They saw the rolls... and they're all the kind of people who accept what happens. So, yeah, Mr. Binkles went boom. Killed all the Troggs, though. Yeah, that was one of the first times I've murdered my wife in one of these games. It's not the last. Or the last time I've done something horrible to her. Thankfully, she forgives me that one, because she thought it was the funniest thing she could ever see. She was just happy that her mech exploded, killing everybody. That's all she cared about. That was the happiest thing for her. She was like, that was awesome. So, alright guys. Well, as always, if you liked the little story, I know it wasn't that detailed. It's pretty simple. You know, hit that like button. If you didn't like it, hit the dislike button. Feel free to comment if you want. Maybe tell me a story that you have that you want to share. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see more nonsense. And hey, thanks for watching, and remember, stay nerdy!